Good afternoon, fellow patriots. This is Matt Shea, and welcome to Patriot Radio, broadcasting live from deep inside the heart of the future Liberty State. Sponsored once again by On Fire Ministries, in the legacy of Dr. Stan Monteith, bringing you the story behind the story and the news behind the news, where it's not about right or left, it's about right and wrong. It's about our hope not being in man, but in Jesus Christ. About not ending in prayer, but moving to action. Your kingdom come, your will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Father, deliver us from the evil one.
Welcome to Patriot Radio.
Good afternoon, fellow patriots, and today on Patriot Radio, Russia threatens the United States with its nuclear tsunami torpedo, and Trump responds in kind. More about that and the fact that this has been around for a very long time. Also, Trump meets with Xi, and it does look like China's unstable, and Trump took very good advantage of that for U.S. trade and rare earth minerals. Also, the ceasefire temporarily broken by Hamas again. Israel strikes back, and Qatar even sides with Israel this time. And our guest today, Amie Ichikawa, who is a new guest to Patriot Radio and is going to be talking about something that is so shocking in the prison system in the United States of America, you're not going to want to miss this episode. You're going to want to bookmark it and share it with your friends and family as well. Here at Patriot Radio, we want you to be informed. We want you to be ready, prepared for the times that are ahead, the times that are already upon us, especially coming up to November 5th, which you'll find out here why in a second. And on Telegram, we provide you with real-time intelligence analysis and breaking news, and especially to break through those NPC people out there that have just come into parroting everything that the left says when facts are beating them in the face. You can use Patriot Radio to help at least enlighten them and open their eyes. We don't want to see them beaten in any way, but we do want to see them awakened, so that they can help awaken other people before it is too late. Which brings us to prayer, which we need to be praying coming up. All of us as Christians need to be praying regarding November 5th, and we need to be praying in the upcoming election, patriotradio.us/prayer. Send in your prayer request, and we would love to pray with you and intercede for what is about to occur in the United States of America in the next 60 days before the new year. What we are really facing has always been spiritual, but it seems like every time we're facing something that is potentially very uncomfortable, very challenging, that we act like it is a surprise. But the scripture actually says something about this, and from your wisdom from the word today, 1 Peter 4:12 says this: "Beloved, do not be surprised at the fiery ordeal among you, which comes upon you for your testing, as though something strange were happening to you." This is all part of the process. We need to embrace the process. But the fact is that the left, the Marxists of the United States, are preparing to conduct a revolution. And it's going to be us as Americans standing up against that, both with our words publicly, but also in the voting booth. And that's why Christians are commanded, actually, to vote. We are operating in a governmental role. That's why the word ecclesia is used when Jesus Christ says, "Upon this rock I will build my ecclesia." The idea that Christians should not vote is a heresy. In fact, false prophets will tell you not to vote. The Russians, the Soviets, understood this, and there were three main active measures the Soviets used to come against the church. First, to diminish the authority of the Word of God. Second, to diminish the supernatural aspect of Christianity. And third, to make the church apathetic. These were very clear strategies by the Kremlin, by the Soviet Union, active measures, started predominantly in the 1960s. And so don't fall into that. Anybody who tells you that Christians shouldn't vote is a false prophet and a heretic, as a matter of fact and as a matter of scripture. You cannot be a Christian saying that there is a part of the world that has been given over to darkness because Jesus wants to redeem all of the world. He has to. He's the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. That's why he died on the cross. And anybody who tells you differently is just trying to sideline you because they know the power of the Christian church when it comes together in unity and operates by the leading of the Holy Spirit. The largest voting bloc in America is Christians. The largest voting bloc in America not registered to vote is Christians. And the largest voting bloc in America that is registered to vote but that doesn't vote is Christians. So, if Christians come together, this country changes, and we are called to be. In fact, the pulpits of America should be aflame with the message of the gospel, giving the United States and the world the moral compass by which we should all be heading. Without the church speaking up, that compass begins to spin. When the church does speak up, the world, the atmosphere in our communities, our nation, and our families change. And that brings us now to your daily intelligence briefing, coming to us from the Globalist Front.
The future is built by us. We have the means to make progress on the global agenda.
Over 100 BSL Level 4 bioweapons labs operate worldwide, with more under construction. Now, obviously, some of this is going to be for research. But the research that's being conducted is always conducted under the auspices of defensive, where they will develop viruses that don't exist. They will develop organisms that don't exist, and then say, well, we're going to prevent any outbreak from those things. Well, you created it. This is the whole thing behind gain-of-function research. And it's raising the question of why high-containment biological research should even occur. And it is something we're going to need to address. And I pray that Secretary Kennedy does address this in the near future. OpenAI says 1 million chatbot or ChatGPT users talk about suicide. It's not just a problem with OpenAI, but also with Grok, Meta, and the multiple companion apps circulating around. The problem stems from the collapse of reality, and it can strike at anybody at any time. So there's a term that's being used, mental vertigo, where people don't know right from wrong. If you're anchored in the gospel, if you're anchored in Jesus Christ, then you will not be susceptible to this. But the fact remains that this is causing a breakdown, a mental breakdown across the world. Once more, when will we talk about and put in place sideboards regarding AI? And we have all these avatars out there, which is a totally separate discussion. We're going to try to get Rabbi Jonathan Cahn on this show to talk about his new book, Avatar, because that is really what people are being turned into. And they're being groomed to be avatars with AI. Millions of America's teens are being seduced by AI chatbots. In addition to the teen suicide epidemic, paranoia, delusions, and breaks from reality, breakup of marriages and families, people being committed to asylums because of these AI chatbots. And why? Because of the delusion and unreality that is being made by this. A new study published October 8th by the Center for Democracy and Technology found that 1 in 5 high school students have a relationship with an AI chatbot or someone or know someone who has. In a 2025 report from Common Sense Media, 72% of teens had used an AI companion, and a third of teen users said that they had chosen to discuss important or serious matters with the AI companion instead of real people. I don't know if anybody has heard of these statistics, but not only does suicide happen there are people taking advantage of AI to troll for vulnerable teens. And the record between first contact and suicide was 14 minutes and apparently is now down to 9 minutes, which is insane. Shut off your phone, shut off your scrolling, get out into the wilderness, prioritize sun, get out into the fresh air, and start having real conversations again. Don't play games online, play board games together. There's something about this that has to change. That brings us now to the China front. Soybeans, rare earth, and fentanyl, 9 key takeaways from Trump's meeting with Xi. I'm going to focus on the first 3. Soybeans. The Chinese have pledged to buy soybeans and sorghum from American farmers. Meanwhile, a rare earth deal for at least the next year has been struck between Trump and Xi. And lastly, China has pledged to help the United States crack down on fentanyl. It's a purposeful Chinese strategy to allow those precursor chemicals to come into the United States. So if they shut that down, have they shut down their strategy? And does that mean that Xi really isn't in control of China and China is unstable? It looks like that's the case. And I think that over the next little while, we're going to see whether this fourth plenum bears out that Xi was the one that was the big loser there. And clearly Trump was acting as part of those negotiations as if he was. Trump says the U.S. reached tariff agreements as well, and that some are close to finalization. Tariffs will drop 10%, which brings levies on Chinese imports to 47%. Trump imposed tariffs on China in January to incentivize Beijing to proactively regulate fentanyl and its precursors. So, as the two leaders met, a lot of decisions were made. There wasn't too much left out there. Again, this looks like China is unstable and that they may not, in fact, invade Taiwan in the near term anymore, that may have gone with the 9 Chinese generals, including the head of Eastcom and Southcom and their police force, which would have been the generals in charge of an invasion of Taiwan, who were very hardcore Xi loyalists, handpicked by Xi and put in by Xi, but removed over the last month. So there may be a faction that says to Xi, stop on your ambitions of invading Taiwan. We're going to wait. That might be how this is playing out. Again, we're going to see we see indicators of that right now, but we're going to see more indicators in the near future, and we'll report them as we get them. Trump said, I had a truly great meeting with President Xi of China. There is enormous respect between our two countries, and that will only be enhanced with what just took place. We agreed on many things, with others, even of high importance, being very close to resolved. I was extremely honored by the fact that President Xi authorized China to begin the purchase of massive amounts of soybeans, sorghum, and other farm products. Our farmers will be very happy. The best is yet to come. Trump says also that as this Asia tour wrapped up and he flew back to the United States, that the U.S. is to share nuclear-powered submarine tech with South Korea. The move is a significant shift in U.S. policy on exporting guarded nuclear submarine technology. This comes on the commitment by South Korea of $150 billion to U.S. shipbuilding investments, with the submarine slated for construction at the Philly shipyard, which means that shipbuilding is in fact coming back to the United States, and we are ramping it up, which many people, myself included, have been calling for a very long time. Trump also directed the Pentagon to start testing nuclear weapons again. He did this an hour before he met with Xi. Clearly a power move, and we're going to explain why a little bit later in the brief. Some more key takeaways from Trump's Asia trip. This one-year Chinese rare earth mineral deal, and also a flurry of rare earth mineral deals with Thailand, Cambodia, and others involved. The strengthened ties with Japan, the $350 billion investment by Seoul, Korea, the clear realignment with a lot of those countries fully on the side of the United States. A massive victory for President Trump and for the United States as part of that tour. Now, on the flip side of it, a top Harvard nuclear scientist is working with a Chinese spy front indicted for recruiting Americans to become spies. Stephen E. Miller, who also runs Harvard's international security program, just appeared at a CCP-controlled think tank flagged by the FBI. Some people are saying this is just the tip of the iceberg and calling for more investigations into those relationships. And I suspect more and more of that is going to be exposed with the Trump administration. That brings us down to the Middle East front. Thousands of protesters flooded Dar es Salaam International Airport in Tanzania, blocking planes and trapping political figures inside the country as unrest over the disputed election entered its second day. Tanzania's presidential election ended in chaos with troops deployed and brutal crackdowns and reports of extrajudicial killings. Local media reported buses set on fire and attacks on polling stations. A curfew is now in place, and authorities have vowed to respond harshly to that unrest. So not only is Cameroon going under the auspices of unrest right now, but also so is Tanzania, which is right on the border with Kenya. Furthermore, the United Arab Emirates exposed jihadist manipulation in the Sudan conflict, and the UAE has accused Sudan's Muslim Brotherhood influenced army and the Rapid Support Forces of committing atrocities and exploiting Islamist propaganda to justify their actions. Now, we have reported on this. I did not show you this live, but there is a myriad videos of massacres happening. Obviously, Christians being killed there, literally shot point blank, men, women, and children in the Sudan by the RSF. I suspect there's going to be an intervention very, very soon in that part of the world. The Red Cross is also heading into Gaza to recover the bodies of 2 deceased hostages. Those are going to be analyzed by Israeli forensics to determine whether, in fact, they are or not. But this comes on the heels of a break of the ceasefire, once again by Hamas, as a matter of fact. And even the Qatari prime minister states that the attack on Israeli soldiers was a violation of the Gaza ceasefire. The PM says efforts are being made to push Hamas to acknowledge the need to disarm. Hamas, spokesman for Hamas, actually came out and said, a leader for Hamas came out and said that the bodies are part of their leverage. So I suspect they're going to continue to trickle out the bodies of hostages over the next few weeks. This is the tactic that they use. They've always used in that part of the world. Thousands of ultra-Orthodox Jews dressed in black rallied in Jerusalem on Thursday to protest against military conscription. For those of you that don't understand this is one of the big fault lines in Israel. The Orthodox Jews don't believe that they should serve in the IDF. You know, the IDF is needed in that area of the world. And so this has always been a tension, particularly under the Netanyahu administration. These public protests have happened in the past, and I expect there's going to be some sort of overture made by Netanyahu in the near future. Also, former Mossad chief Yossi Cohen revealed that Israeli intelligence foiled a terror plot to bomb a flight from Sydney to the Gulf. Now, this comes on the heels of the Israeli Mossad also calling out Great Britain for not acknowledging the help Israel has given them in thwarting terror attacks on British soil. So Israel is saying, look, we did this for you. What do? You go and come against the interests of Israel. Perhaps we should cut off intelligence to you. When we come back from the break, more happening with the threat by Vladimir Putin against the United States and President Trump. And also on the national front, it looks like the left has picked a date for the start of a revolution here in the United States. And that date is next week.
What if I told you you could convert your 401k or your IRA into gold? While your retirement is being beat up by a volatile stock market and inflation, it could instead be resting safely in physical gold at a place of your own choosing, including your own business. Look, gold has increased 50% in just the last year. Stock market, it's been nothing but a roller coaster. So protect your retirement from market chaos by calling Verity Metals today.
And we're back with the Russia front. The European Commission will unveil a plan in November to rapidly move heavy military equipment across the EU in case of war with Russia. The initiative aims to speed up the transport of tanks and artillery by improving infrastructure and simplifying customs procedures between member states. So this is probably one of the biggest things that needs to happen for the EU to be prepared for a war in Europe. The fact that they made that public obviously bodes ill for peace there in the long term. Russian President Vladimir Putin has announced that Russia successfully tested the Poseidon nuclear-capable doomsday torpedo capable of triggering radioactive tsunamis, rendering coastal cities uninhabitable. This was first really talked about in 2000. Stanislav Lunev, among other Soviet defectors, have brought this up, that this was a real plan by Russia to mitigate the fact the United States didn't have any states bordering. They had coasts and oceans, that this nuclear torpedo, tsunami torpedo, would be able to flood U.S. ports and to flood and create catastrophe in the United States on both coasts. So Vladimir Putin did this, clearly a threat to the United States, clearly a threat to President Trump, and clearly eviscerating the narrative by some of the pro-Russia folks here in the United States. The Kremlin then walked back its test claims as Trump orders the U.S. to begin nuclear testing in the United States. In other words, Trump said, okay, we're going to start testing nuclear weapons. He also revealed that we now have more nuclear weapons than any other country in the world, and that he modernized the nuclear arsenal under his previous administration, both of which were candidly pretty secret. So the fact he did that is a huge power move to say to Russia, get in line and come to the peace table. There are a few people making noises about Russia testing a nuclear propulsion system and the U.S. not having anything similar, and yet we actually do. NASA and DARPA will test a nuclear engine for future Mars missions shortly. We're also going to talk about some very challenging individuals questioned our talk about UFOs being demonic on the last show. I talked about skunk works. I talked about some of the technology we have. People don't even understand. I'm going to get to that. An article came out about this just yesterday. But back to the Russia front, the operational command of the Polish Armed Services reports a scramble of fighter jets with the Polish and allied air forces in response to an ongoing drone and missile attack by Russia against locations in western Ukraine. This is the second scrambling that's happened in the last week. We can expect that to continue, especially over the holiday season, and it looks like the Russians will try to disrupt holiday travel using drones in Eastern Europe. In an attempt to pretend to stop buying Russian oil, India has begun ship-to-ship transfers from shadow vessels in international waters. And oh, look at that. They got caught with satellite imagery. I'm sure the Trump administration is going to call them out soon about that. According to Bloomberg, the sanctioned tanker Furia, which was en route to India carrying nearly 730,000 barrels of Russian crude oil, has changed course and is now anchored in the Baltic Sea, which may mean that the buyer has refused to accept it. Another indicator that the Russian energy infrastructure is suffering dramatically with the sanctions and with the attacks by Ukraine, which it would be the primary driver of Putin to the negotiating table. Ukraine also highlighted that the main directorate of intelligence carried out an operation in Kemerovo Oblast of central Russia, over 2,000 miles from Ukraine, to assassinate Lieutenant Colonel Mazarin, a member of the OMON's Obereg unit under the Russian National Guard. This just came out, even though it happened on October 25th. And there is the video of the assassination, the Ukrainians ramping up sabotage operations deep into Russia. The Ukrainians also continuing to target the Russian energy supply and targeting specifically the manufacturing and creating gaps between the oil fields and refineries and end users as part of their strategy to ramp up pressure on Vladimir Putin. That brings us now to the South America front. Secretary Rubio, quote, "We are prepared to offer immediate humanitarian aid to the people of Cuba affected by the hurricane," end quote. Typically, Cuba spurns those offers, but it is out there once again to show the Cuban people that the United States would like to help them. Also, a submarine navigation system testing and ballistic missile flight tests support ship operated by the U.S. Military Sealift Command and the MV Ocean Trader, a highly customized roll-on and roll-off cargo ship which was converted into a special operations command center and mothership, was seen south of Puerto Rico today near the coast of Venezuela. One more indicator of an impending operation there in the next few weeks. That brings us to the national front. Troops in the military will receive their next paycheck amid the shutdown, says the OMB. They figured out a way around the Schumer shutdown. And the left in the United States is calling for insurrection and revolution and has now picked a date, calling for millions of protesters on November 5th to surround the White House and not leave until Trump is removed from power. There is implications on back channels that those will include violent tactics, not just rhetoric. Sam Faddis has picked this up, former CIA operations officer. Group called Refuse Fascism is calling on people from all over America to descend on Washington on November 5th. They aren't organizing a protest. They intend to surround the White House, the Capitol, the Supreme Court, and shut down the government until Trump resigns as president. Fascism is not a looming threat. It is upon us now. And notice they keep using those terms to justify violence against Christians, violence against patriots in the United States. General Flynn put out a quick warning: buckle up and get prepared. And I would echo that warning and that admonition to everyone listening and watching Patriot Radio today. You need to get prepared. This could get very ugly very quickly. Also, this is in the window of time that if SNAP benefits are cut off, this would be about a week after SNAP benefits are cut off, which is when you'd start to see unrest begin to unfold just for that piece. Here is one of the flyers that they put up as well. Have you been added to a Nazi MAGA group chat? We pay cash for screenshots. They're now asking for people to integrate into conservative chats and then turn on those people and post those things publicly to, again, gin up emotion and gin up a reason for violence against Christian and patriots in the United States. Meanwhile, another outage by the Amazon web services yesterday, showing that it is likely there will be some disruption of web services over the holidays to provide the most impact. Notice how all of these are coming together between this time we're in right now and the end of the year. DOD announces federal charges against 10 anti-ICE protesters who ambushed law enforcement during a raid on a California pot farm. Following that, the director of the National Center for Terrorism, Joe Kent, put out a warning to law enforcement about terror attacks on U.S. soil. And this came on the heels of a release by AQAPs, that's Al-Qaeda, Saeed al-Awlaki, calling for attacks in the United States, yet the FBI is still telling law enforcement, I suspect these are rogue elements, telling law enforcement and local communities that Al-Qaeda isn't planning an attack on the homeland, even though multiple sources, this isn't a single source, this is multiple sources, are saying that Al-Qaeda is being very clear and calling for an attack on the U.S. homeland between Thanksgiving and February. Interesting as well that some recent information came out that Zohran Mamdani, his mother, in a 2013 interview said, quote, he is not an American at all. Representative Andy Ogles has urged the Attorney General to investigate Zohran Mamdani for a possible federal crime for concealing praise of terrorists during his naturalization process. And also, they ask questions about your affiliation with communist parties and Marxist organizations, and your sympathies toward them, and your sympathies toward jihadi organizations, and your connections as well. Did he lie on those? Be interesting to see if that investigation actually happens. Meanwhile, it came out yesterday that 20% of Republicans in the Senate were the targets of Biden's DOJ Arctic Frost fishing expedition, including spying on their cell phones, including possibly their official office phones, which would have been a violation of 2 USC 6628, according to Mike Fragoso. The judge, Boasberg, may have violated this statute. Jack Smith subpoenaed Cruz's cell phone records from AT&T, and AT&T was ordered by Boasberg, banning AT&T from disclosing the subpoena to Cruz. So the Senate is very upset about this, and this is just the tip of the iceberg. Boasberg issued blanket orders to the cell phone companies not to reveal the search warrants. He's a FISA court judge. He's also the judge that authorized one of the Carter Page Title I surveillance warrants. He also hired Mary McCord as an amicus to the court, and after appointing Mary McCord to take up a defensive position for herself in the FISA court, Judge Boasberg then becomes a presiding judge in the case against the FBI agent who falsified the FISA application, Kevin Kleinsmith. Then he gave Kleinsmith a slap on the wrist a few months later. This needs to be completely uprooted and changed, and I pray that there is accountability here so this never happens again. On the good news front, Pete Hegseth and Donald Trump saying we won the war on climate change. Bill Gates has finally admitted that he was completely wrong on the issue. So it looks like climate change has been dealt a death blow. Ohio Secretary of State referred over 1,200 non-citizens to the DOJ for criminal cases, including unlawful voter registrations and ballots cast in federal elections since 2018, proving conclusively that this has been an issue, that those who said it was were lying to you. In a bombshell moment as well, Governor Ron DeSantis abolished H-1B visas from being used at state universities. H-1B audits found colleges were bringing in Chinese people on visas to talk to students about public policy, among other issues, and the implication there is they were very likely setting up Chinese spy networks in this country. He's disrupting it. Now, DeSantis recently has been doing some great stuff. He also has been talking about the abolition of the property tax. And that abolition of the property tax is something that we have been advocating for a very long time. Now, lastly, we're going to talk about UFOs quickly before we go to the break. The head of Skunk Works at Lockheed Martin said, the things flying around in the Nevada desert, this is regards to Groom Lake, also known as Area 51, that they are 50 years beyond what you can comprehend. If you've seen it on Star Wars or Star Trek, we've either been there, done that, or decided it wasn't worth the effort. So people that say, well, we have no technology. Literally, the director, the head of Skunk Works is saying, actually, we've been working on that for a very long time. You can see that on the thread on X at Rep Matt Shea. Lastly, J.D. Vance said on UFOs, I'm a big believer that there are things out there that we can't explain. If another person sees an alien, maybe I see an angel or a demon. I'm a big believer that there are like spiritual forces working on the physical world that a lot of us don't see and a lot of us don't understand. Amen. Now from the highest levels, talking about the spiritual and the fact, as Christians, we can fight back, and God has given us the authority over all the power of the enemy. Luke 10:19. We'll come back from the break. Our guest today, Amie Ichikawa.
What if I told you you could convert your 401k or your IRA into gold? While your retirement is being beat up by a volatile stock market and inflation, it could instead be resting safely in physical gold at a place of your own choosing, including your own business. Look, gold has increased 50% in just the last year. Stock market, it's been nothing but a roller coaster. So protect your retirement from market chaos by calling Verity Metals today.
And we're back with our guest today, Amie Ichikawa. She is an ambassador at Independent Women and Independent Women's Voice. She is one of the founders of Woman to Woman, a nonprofit organization providing reentry services, parole hearing prep, and advocacy for the safety and dignity of incarcerated women in California. In partnership with Independent Women, as an ambassador, she's blowing the whistle on how behind bars incarcerated women are sitting ducks, vulnerable to violence at the hands of biological males who enter into prisons identifying as transgender women. I have been looking forward to this show. Thank you so much for joining me on Patriot Radio today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Amie, you're so courageous, and I want to honor that before the Lord. You are so courageous, saying yes to go into a subject and a situation where I know you have received a lot of backlash. If you've looked at my Wikipedia page, you know that we share that in common potentially. So I would like to start by just saying that with these subjects we're going to talk about today, you are not talking about this as speculation. You are talking about this from hard fact. And this is going to challenge a lot of people, and people need to have an open heart and an open mind to what they're about to hear today, that something needs to shift in this arena. So if you could tell a little bit about your story and a little bit about what you experienced and also what we need to do about it.
Well, I am formerly incarcerated. I did spend 5 years in the largest women's prison in the state of California. I was, how old was I? 24 years old. I started a little late. I got caught up. My story starts like many other women's stories. There was this guy, just took a lot of wrong turns, had a very toxic, negative relationship, and I made some really poor decisions. And I ended up with a 5-year sentence. And during that time, I wasn't housed, but there was an individual who was transferred into our prison, who's a biological male, who's a serial rapist, who committed 2 rapes in the same county as the prison fits in. These were very violent crimes. There was torture involved. This changed the entire culture within the facility. Women were terrified. They felt abandoned by the governor. People were just crying, calling home. People didn't believe us. Even my own parents thought that I was losing my mind, because it was so unbelievable that the state would house a serial rapist inside of the women's prison, directly in women's general population.
That is crazy. Now,
it is.
So they're having more rights than the ladies that are incarcerated. If you could kind of expand on that, give some details here.
There's a lot of policies, and these are based on federal guidelines in the Prison Rape Elimination Act. And within these policies and guidelines, they are given rights that nobody's ever experienced in the carceral system. They're able to select who they live with, where they live, what jobs they want. They can say that they don't feel safe with certain individuals in their cells. They can displace entire rooms full of people because they want to live alone. And, in women's prisons, a lot of them have different settings. It's not like what you see on TV. Central California women's facilities have 8-person cells. So these individuals have the right to walk in and say, I like this room, but I'm scared of everybody in here. And every other person inside will be displaced. Unless, of course, there's somebody of their liking that they want to keep in there, they can keep that individual in there. The medical is completely unbelievable. They have access to purely cosmetic procedures, breast implants, full body laser hair removal, vaginoplasties. These are all on the taxpayer dollars. I think in 2024 or 2023, California spent $4 million on breast implants. One individual just actually got their breast implants enlarged and got a facelift. Women in prison can't get a tooth fixed unless it's the two front teeth because it's considered cosmetic otherwise. If you have slip discs and you need a breast reduction because your back is breaking, you're going to have to appeal and appeal and appeal because you will be denied based on the fact that this is somehow cosmetic, but it's not if you're trans-identified.
I am absolutely. I thought I've heard, and I've heard some of the issues in the prison system in Washington State as a state legislator, but this is absolutely shocking. So they have access. I want to go back to something. So you have convicted rapists who have access to women as biological males. Are these males that have not undergone transition fully? In other words, they have working equipment?
Absolutely. There's no requirement to be on hormone replacement to even want to get reassignment surgery. So these are fully intact males with working pipes that they use, whether you like it or not. And most of them, I don't want to say most, but a large percentage of these individuals do have long histories of violence against women, sex crimes, crimes against children. And there's nowhere else to house them safely. So this isn't the women's responsibility, but somehow it is now.
So, and many of these women that have been incarcerated obviously have backgrounds. They've suffered abuse themselves, sexual abuse, physical abuse themselves in their childhood. Didn't have a father, what have you. And so you're putting them now in another potentially abusive situation. Now, you said that they use their equipment. I don't want you to get too graphic here, but are you saying that they are enabled to have sexual relations in prison, even though they are convicted rapists?
They did install condom dispensers in the women's prisons in California 3 years ago, about a year or so after this law was being implemented. It was a law statewide that our attorney general had written when he was an assemblyman. And this was supposed to be implemented in every prison by 2019. But what was the purpose by 2019? But what was the purpose of doing that in a women's prison? We don't need that, obviously. But in the midst of, the forced integration and all the staff sexual misconduct, they thought it was a great idea to go ahead and put the condom dispensers in with rainbow condoms and flavored dental dams. So this kind of seemed like a green light for sexual activity, whether it was consensual or not, even though there really is no consent when you're in custody.
This is demonic is what this is. I'm just going to be really blunt here. Okay, so your experience, you're incarcerated. What are some of the things you saw that people need to hear about and you need to call attention to and raise the red flag on?
Well, one of the most important things is that the cultures between men and women's prisons is completely different. There are no similarities. We are not separated by security level, by gang affiliation, by regional, arrest history or anything like that. Men are separated for very many reasons, all for security purposes. They're taking men off of death row and placing them directly into women's general population with security levels 1 through 4. So from shoplifters to murderers, you're putting men from death row, of which there is no security equivalent in a women's facility. They're coming from prisons with armed guards that have, mini 14s in every housing unit. And our women's prison has one gun in one tower. So this is a danger to the population inside, the population outside. I don't even think that's legal.
I don't think it is either.
I don't think you're not supposed to house people that are serving life sentences in prisons that don't have electric fences. And the person who transferred in when I was incarcerated is currently in a medium security, non-electric fence having prison. And this is somebody who's serving life without for a double rape and torture. This is predator prioritization at its best. The West Coast is really carrying the torch on this. There's I don't think America is ready for this.
Well, how? Okay, so I mean, the secondary and tertiary effects of this are. We'll get into that here in a second. But how they have to do in every state that I know of, they have to do an individual assessment of every inmate, right? And part of that assessment is their propensity for violent behavior and their propensity for recidivism. So if they're doing that assessment in a men's prison, and it would mean something totally different, and yet in a women's prison, it doesn't seem to be carrying over, I would think that would be a violation of the law, because there are policies and laws that require those assessments to be done, and for the housing and security arrangements and health and everything else to be taken into consideration and factored into the placement of those inmates. How are they getting around that?
The trans identity takes priority over all of that. They have created an untouchable class of people that are superior in every sense. The regulations don't apply to them. The staff are all afraid of the high-powered law firms that accompany them when they transfer in. It's creating a supremacy situation. It's not healthy, and I'm very, convinced that this is what's to come if we don't stop it in the prison system. They're creating this untouchable, victim class that they can wield control over the rest of the population with,
and cause further harm to inmates that are going to have to deal with that when they eventually get out. We're going to go ahead and forego the commercials and keep talking about this, because this is absolutely important that everybody is hearing this and watching this. So as a Christian, obviously this goes against everything that the scripture says. So how did you deal with that as a Christian? And what else did you see that was decidedly anti-Christian in the system?
Well, I had a real serious come to Jesus moment in 2019 when women I don't even know started calling me and writing me, and they were terrified. Old ladies, little ladies, big ladies, tall ladies, they were all devastated, saying, what are we going to do? I mean, there were seasoned, lieutenants and sergeants that were crying with them in front of their units saying, we're sorry, we've failed you. Most, people in the department didn't think that this was going to happen because it sounded so insane. So they weren't really expecting this to ever be implemented, but it was, and it's devastating because nobody knows. Nobody remembers the prisoners, especially the women. There's got to be a cultural shift, especially in the body of Christ, because we have to act as if we're inside and a part of our own body is being injured, because it is. There's women who have stood firm on their Christian conservative values, and they've lost their parole dates. They've lost everything. They get retaliated against. They're in danger. The women who speak out, I am very afraid for, and especially in California, they're afraid to speak out entirely because the other NGOs will go in there and tell them all kinds of lies and say your commutations are being overlooked because of your allegations of transphobia and your transphobic associations, aka me. They're doing everything they can to shut them up, and it's a violation of their right to free speech. They're allowed to talk still, even though they're incarcerated. But this is definitely, like you said, this is demonic. This is the darkest thing a lot of dark stuff happens in prison. There's a lot of medical testing. There's a lot of socioeconomic experimentation, but this is by far the worst.
Well, this is psychological experimentation as well. I mean, that's what it sounds like to me. And what also is very interesting about this is that those folks coming out of an abusive background, they've already experienced this kind of manipulation, especially if they came out of human trafficking, this kind of manipulation, leveraging. So they're like, well, I guess the whole world is like this. And they just give up. This is horrible.
There's so much complex PTSD. The symptoms are kind of blanketed over the entire population, because the ACLU did a study in the 90s that said 92% of incarcerated women in California have been battered or beaten. But in my personal experience, every woman in there, 100%, has been sexually abused, financially abused, physically abused. There isn't anybody that I met in my 5-year term that wasn't a survivor.
Now, you said there medical testing. I wanna just grab onto that for a second. Is there other experimentation other than potentially psychological that is going on in the prison system in California?
They're prescribing Ozempic. I'm sorry, they're prescribing all of the, those drugs, those types of drugs to everybody. So many people are on GLPs. They're also giving out testosterone like candy. If you're even slightly, tomboyish or male presenting, they'll ask you, don't you want to get on testosterone? Don't you want to get on T? And I strongly believe this is just extended California eugenics. It never stopped. It never stopped. Women, if they're getting testosterone shots, have to get them administered by the nurses. And if they don't go, if they miss a shot, they get a write-up. Men who are transitioning and get estrogen get a month's supply, and they get to just walk away from the window, and there's no requirement to even take the pills.
Wow.
What other there's
Well,
I mean, there was just a few years ago that they stopped the forced sterilization. There were hundreds of women who were unknowingly getting full hysterectomies, and they didn't even know. California is a dark place. Something happened a long time ago, and I don't know what kind of portal they opened, but it's very bad. The roots are very deep. It's bad.
Well, in the last 5 minutes we got, I want to go into that, what you just kind of tugged on that thread. Does the DOJ know about this stuff, and is the DOJ investigating the California prison system?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, we'll leave it at that. That's fine. It's an
lot,
ongoing, because I was going to make sure that they saw this episode. Praise the Lord. So shifting gears a little bit, we deal with satanic ritual abuse survivors here. Some people that have been, trafficked. And so some of what you said earlier about, well, because of your associations, blaming somebody, those are hallmarks of a little bit of indoctrination into, or opening the door to the occult. Is that happening in the California prison system?
Yes. Yes, it is, inside and out. Because I know there is some real witchery going on in some of the organizations that are heavily funded and very powerful within the Department of Corrections. They have a very strong influence amongst the department as well as the population of incarcerated folks. And it's heavy.
So what does that look like without getting into the names? What does that look like?
They have so much money, and they'll have these great retreats, and all you have to do is read the script and do what they tell you, and you'll get a salary and you'll be happy and you're owned. They're buying people. They're buying people that are going to help them bring in more people so that they can create this humongous Marxist victim pool that just gets bigger and bigger with every, man-made crisis that they socially design.
Are they being asked to pledge allegiance to something? Are they being asked to be part of rituals? I mean, what does this look like in detail? Yeah.
I think there's a big push to separate them from the Lord. People are laughed at when they want to say grace before dinner. Even inside, their professors want them to write papers about the occult, and the occult is only the occult because it goes against Judeo-Christian normative values. I have lifers who are some of my most trusted friends that are super strong, calling me crying, saying, I want to drop out of college because I don't know, they're making me feel stupid for loving Jesus. They're getting hit from every angle with the indoctrination process. There is no respite.
Wow. So what would be your message today to policymakers that might be watching, pastors that might be watching Patriot Radio on patriot.tv or listening across the whole Pacific Northwest?
I would implore them to please check in with their local women's prisons. If you don't have a ministry, please start one. The women are desperate. They need partnership. They need prayer. They just need to know that someone cares. And when people show up for them, it scares the department. There is no opposition to the efforts that are negative inside. I'm just one person, they need to have pastors come in and want to, have special church services again. It's not like it was when I was inside. It's not like that at all. The biggest celebration is pride inside now. It's been taken over, and they really need some light.
Amie, this is an incredible interview. I'm shocked. I shouldn't be, probably, but some of the stuff that I heard today is new to me. And I want to thank you for highlighting it, bringing attention to it, and for your courage standing in a huge headwind, but standing on the rock of Jesus Christ.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the support.
Absolutely. So please stay on the line afterwards. I'm going to talk to you about a couple other things, and we're going to be continuing praying for you. Keep up the fight. Amie Ichikawa, she is an ambassador for several organizations, but particularly independent women, and just bringing a spotlight to this. I don't know if any of you were as outraged as I was hearing some of this stuff, but here's what you can do. I want you to take this episode. I want you to share it with your local policymaker, whoever that is in the Pacific Northwest or around the country. Share it with your policymaker and say, did you know this is happening inside the prison system? And are you investigating this? And what are you doing at the state and the local level to address this stuff? This is crazy. I suspect in conservative states, in solid red states, this is happening as well. And we need to stand up now and call attention to this. This is Matt Shea. Thank you for joining me on Patriot Radio today. May God bless all of you. He is making this generation the greatest one. The awakening is here. So stand up. Keep up the fight.